they do get better. This is my fourth time around on this one. I think that's a Dylan song, Bob Dylan song from long ago. And I don't know why it's true. I don't know why this happened to me. I don't know why I feel no patriotism, no racial allegiance. I like Manchester City. That's about it, I have to say. I saw Zhivov Zizek, I think that's his name, something like that. This marvelous, where's he from? He's from one of the old Yugoslavias, Slovenian. And he was talking about, he's wonderful old communist, and he was talking about many things, but he said, it has to be, you have to admit that the classical music, the Beethoven and Brahms, is superior. I don't want to attack the Europeans. I'm going, yeah, no, I understand that. I think it's superior being a very European concept. And I go, well, it's, he said he went to communist China and they had record stores full of every version you could find of Western classical German music. And they considered it the greatest stuff. And somebody said, well, listen to ancient Chinese opera. And he said, it doesn't compare. It's terrible. So I thought, well, yeah, I can see that. But have you heard the folk ragas from the north of India? For me, with exposure to all of these things, this marvelous exposure to world music, that is the stuff that sends me. That is the apex. That, and I don't need to say it, he does because of his tradition. That is the superior thing to me. It's not important to me. Anyway, so I don't know why it's true. Something happened, but I do confess I do. I am investigating, but I start here. The worst crime that happened in the history of the world of the human, was the Western European colonialism. And it was bad in itself, bad enough in itself, but the myths that have adhered since and continue, the stories that we, educated by that culture, need to tell ourselves, that must adhere to such ignominy, are bound to be worse. It is my bias, my bête noire, my rage. I think I've been done through this thing before, but on the plains of the United States in the late 18th century, 1860s, 70s, 80s, you had Indian fighters. They were government soldiers who went out to fight against mostly the Plains Indians, who were the most aggressive and most resistant. And almost to a man, their leaders said that these Indians need to be left alone, that their reprisals against the colonizing of their land was understandable. They actually liked Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull and Red Cloud. They met with them and they had conversations and they found there was a lot of sympathy. So that's an interesting point. But the people like you and I who sit back at home and feed off mythologies created by our journalists largely, by our literatures, our writers, etc., we are the ones. We are the ones who need to change. We will be the last to change. And when that changes, it will be useful. It is my bias, my bête noire, and my rage. It disables me from being critical of Europe on Europe contests. I just don't care. They bring it on themselves. The colonies did not. Ukraine versus Russia means nothing to me. This is an admission. It's not a justification. Call me heartless. I don't care. I read a funny story I thought was satire until I confirmed it. In the 11th century, the Slav warlords in Ukraine took a breather from decapitating each other and decided they needed to ask the Vikings to rule them, since they couldn't control their vendetta tendencies and needed the famously brutal to rule. I've related this before. Some things never change. then I suppose they whined when the Vikings withdrew, which they did, but the whining they were prone to do and still are prone to do. Have Europeans always been so whiny and dependent? No. But today, is it just their religion? Is this whiny-souled relationship to life the dark heart of colonialism? The self-hatred required to be so bloody Belgian? I think what I feel is what Europeans felt and still feel about Africa. Oh, they're always going to war and dictatoring and killing each other. Well, I feel that about Europe, and history backs me up. What is going on in Gaza is blatant European behavior. The only change is that people, Europeans, are waking as if from a long sleep, awakened mostly by Jewish reporters of the genocide, are going, dang, and it's usually the young ones. But their instinct, their perverse and educated instinct, typically European, is to focus on Ukraine, which has a direct analogy: the Gulf War, Desert Cry, Freedom Storm, Rambo 6, or whatever messianic Hollywood name the stupid president had to give it, which was much bloodier with infinitely less cause than the Russian invasion. Only the victims of that war were Arabs, and the Ukrainians are Europeans. Friends of mine shiver at the name of Putin, while I might puke at W, but I don't. Though I do at Starmer and the most Euro leaders at the moment. It's just the way I'm made, maybe because I know them so well. The West worked very hard, all of its press worked very hard in my youth to presume all Russian leaders were something horrible. I found them no more horrible nor interesting than Westerners. Once they were better covered, Gorbachev, etc., I thought they were geniuses, especially compared to Maggie and Ronnie, who mangled the language and propagandized their nasty empires. I see the fervor of the Trump hatred. I see it. I do every day. It's incredible. But it's so disproportionate. To my mind, after Democrats exposed themselves as biblically genocidal, there's nothing I can do with that. On October the 6th of 2023, trust me, I felt very differently. I thought, they had a not very bright fellow in the office who had reneged on most of his promises. But when they dragged him out on the 7th or the 8th, and he said, oh, yeah, I got Israel's back. We got Israel's back. I thought, well, fuck you. That was my priority. And this is interesting. Bear with me. It is not to blame Israel. It is that mythology that I talked about. Israel's reaction is natural. It's totally natural. And let them do that. They're doing that. They couldn't do it without the assistance of a parasitic West that is desperate for a psychological relationship to an Israel. It's a very sick relationship. That was my priority in the last election. Subsumes everything else. What would these people do without Putin and Trump to cleanse themselves by comparison? Of course, the European sanction genocide, ignore the implication of their participation and find something else to protest about. This manic laundering of linen, every epoch brings the new version. Their axis of despots grows and grows. Coincidence? As people wake up to the colonial crimes of yore, and not just the wealth owed, reparations, but still circulating in capitalist coffers. But the moral gymnastics, this is the extraordinary thing, the moral gymnastics of holding forth and sending bombs based on the concept of ancestral homelands must be exhausting. Colonial powers sending bombs based on the notion of ancestral homelands. If you don't think that's funny, we need to double your student debt. Even the dumbest Democrat must acknowledge this irony. How many innocent non-gang members did the deporter-in-chief send back to death squads? I exonerate nothing Trump is doing, only acknowledge what Biden and Obama and Clinton did in the name of supremacy. A righteous protester against persecution of Colombia. The Colombia kids protesting the slaughter in Gaza on April the 10th this year. Remembered on April the 18th, the cops came in arresting and terrorizing. Oops. That was April the 18th, 2024. The American, the last European standing, the rich offspring taking care of its parents, maybe. Europe in a raspy Corleone voice. Who's going to take care of me in my old age? Wheeze. And Trump says, pay for your own stupid war. And Europe mistaking itself for the paragon of animals again. The beauty of the world again says, you're a tyrant. They who invented the office. I had a great laugh reading about Code Pink in the New York Times, the Chinese propaganda. The only piece of propaganda I found, somebody was saying, and the Chinese are putting out this propaganda that the colonialism started in 1492. And I'm going, I don't need the Chinese to tell me that. Sorry, dears. It didn't come from them. It comes from anybody reading any piece of history. It's not propaganda. Historic truth. Oh, white supremacist oracle, the New York Times. No need of Chinese to tell me that. We could give it a name, counter-propaganda, which is often the truth by another name. I can't take you seriously because you can't take yourselves honestly. Projecting onto the Chinese the goals of manifest destiny will work. Even people as brainwashed as Europeans vaguely remember their own myths, squint and say, oh yeah, that's human nature. We know. We defined it once upon a time. So yeah, and that take it. Well, don't. You're going to leave it. You're not going to like it. There's nothing I can do. And I think there is whatever Trump is doing, which is ghastly. He is ghastly. Has been going on my whole life in America. It's just that the Democrats, wore a better frock, said it in a better way. The root evil is the notion of supremacy, which is the notion that drove colonialism, which is the notion that they got from the Catholic Church. Can't get away from it. Until you stop doing that, I ain't voting for any of you.